everyone. In this video, we are going to be going over the graphing exercise. Over here, you can see that this graphing exercise has two parts. I'm going to use the first part to do a demonstration with Excel, so that way you can visualize the instructions. To start, it says to determine the concentration of an unknown solution using spectrophotometry, light absorbance, you will first need to build a calibration curve. To do this, enter the following data for known stock solutions with titles starting in cell A1 as shown. So I just basically type in exactly what this picture shows over here. Now we are going to go over the instructions and add in the different chart components. I'm not going to be necessarily following the instructions. I'm going to do it in a different order, so that way it can be easier for you to do search if you are looking for a specific function. So the first thing is we are going to try to make a chart that, based on the instruction, it says that we need a XY plot with no lines. So how we're going to do this is we're going to click and drag to highlight the data points that we are trying to make, and we can hit insert, and down here you can see that there's a lot of options. The one that we're looking for is a scatter plot XY with no lines. If you're not sure which one of these icons is referring to, if you hover your mouse over it, it will show a tooltip that says XY parentheses scatter. And I hope you know what you meant, because when I try to move my mouse to circle it, it kind of disappeared. So the first one is what we're looking for. It's because it says XY and no line. So this is what we have. This is the one that is generated by default. The next thing we have to do is to add in the different chart elements. So there are different ways that you can do this. When you click on the chart, it automatically goes to the tab Chart Design. And on the left side, you can see there are chart elements and quick layout. If you do add chart elements, you can add the elements one by one. So you can decide to add the x-axis label and y-axis label separately, add a chart title, different data labels, etc. There's another option which I usually like better, is to do quick layout. So the next icon, you can see that there are a lot of layouts that's just automatically laid out for you. So for ours, in this case, we only need the simplest one. So when I click on that, you can see that it has a X and Y axis label that popped out automatically. And then it has a apps for the legend. So what I'm going to do is, because we only have one data set, we don't need the legend. So I'm just going to click on this and then delete, so that way it only keeps what I want it to keep. Now we need to change the chart title to a descriptive chart title. So for lack of any creativity, I'm going to name it absorbance, or we can just call it calibration curve, because I think the lab manual says that we are going to build a calibration curve. So I'm going to call it the calibration curve. Usually you can say calibration curve of whatever chemical it is, but in this case we don't know, so I'm going to leave it like that. And hopefully you are more creative than I am in coming up with a descriptive chart title. Now for the y-axis, we're plotting absorbance on the y-axis. Now if you're not sure whether your x and y are plotted correctly, you can always check by first absorbing the values. So you can see that the range of this tick mark is from 0 to about 1. And the range for this one is 0 to 0.018. So it's a lot smaller. So you can see that that means that the concentration is plotted on the x-axis, which is what we want. These are the ticks that has a smaller magnitude. And then the absorbance is plotted on the y-axis, which are the ticks with a slightly larger magnitude. Another way to check this is if you can click on the dots, and you can see that it automatically highlighted as purple and blue. So in Excel, assuming that the Excel has not changed between the different versions, the purple one is usually the x-axis and the blue one is usually the y-axis. It's by default, most of the time it will plot x versus y. So the left column is X and the right column is Y. But sometimes it decided to not do that, so always double check. Okay, so the axis title for the y-axis is absorbance. And absorbance doesn't have a unit, so we're just going to leave it like that. For the y-axis, it's concentration. And based on the instruction, it doesn't really tell us the unit, but since it's a calibration curve for a spectrophotometry experiment, usually it's reported in molarity. Now, whether it's micromolar or molar, we don't know, but in this case, I'll leave it as molar unless it is otherwise stated. So these are with the axes. Now with the axis label, another thing that we can change is the correct number of sig figs for the ticks. So you can right click, so you can select the x-axis and right click to format axes. If you format the axes, you can change the number of sig figs on the x-axis label. You see how there are different drop-down menus. The drop-down menu we're looking for is the one called number, which is the one at the end. There's a category where, again, there's a drop-down menu. It's by default going to be general, but we're going to select the number. When the numbers show up, it has a decimal places for you to select. Currently it's 2, and you can change it to 3 if you want. I'm going to leave it at 3 for the sake of demonstration. So this is how you can change the X and Y axis tick labels. The next thing that we can also do is add the grid lines for the X axis. So we can do this by right click again, so you have to select the X axis and you can see it's being selected. Right click and then, right click on it and you can see add major grid line or add minor grid line. The instruction asks us to add minor grid line, so I'm going to add the minor grid line on here. And lastly, with the axes, it says that we can change it to scale it so that way it is occupying the entire graph. So currently this particular graph does not require that, but let's say that, let me move this over here. Let's say that we have a graph that looks just, okay. You see how there is like a significant amount of white spaces over here? This is because the tick marks go from 0 to 0.05, but our largest tick mark only goes to 0.015. So we can change this by right click on the x-axis again, and then format axes. Down here you can see that there is a minimum and a maximum. So you can adjust the minimum or the maximum. So now I'm going to adjust the maximum to 0.018 and then you hit enter. If you have a lot of white spaces on the left side, then you can imagine you're changing the minimum bound. So that's how you can change the bound for the axes. So now that is the axes, the chart title. And in order to change the font size of the chart title, you can click on it. So if you select it, you can just go to home and then change the font to 16. And you can also highlight it and do the same thing, however you feel is the most convenient for you. And one other thing that it says is that we have to make sure to add a text box. So we can add a text box by doing insert. So again, upper left where there's a tab, shapes, and then insert the text box. The text box is the one with an A. You just click on anywhere on the chart. I think it says that we have to do it on the upper corner, but right now I'm just going to put it there as a placeholder, and you can move it wherever the instruction says. So down here, I'm going to add shape. It says that we have to add our name and also the section number. So I'm going to say I am section number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I need to spell my name right. And one little trick, if you want this text box to pop out a little more, you can always come to home and then add a shade to it. I personally really like doing this because it helps it stand out. So that way, when the people need to read what is in the text box, they can see it it just popped out visually, but it's not required as part of your assignment. And one last thing that we are going to do is to add a trendline equation. So for the trendline equation, we are going to click on the dots and make sure when you click on it, all the dots are highlighted. Sometimes when you double click it, or only one of them will be highlighted, and you can observe it by looking at which dot is selected. So there are like 4 little anchors around the dot. This means that only one of them is selected, but if you do it again, all 5 is now selected. Now I can right click and then add trend line. So you can see that on the right side, it pops out an add trend line option, and you can set the intercept. So the instructions tell us to set the intercept to be 0. So right now it's just 0.0. We also have to display the equation and also the r-squared value. And with that, once again, I am going to highlight this because it's just very hard to see over there. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, thank you for watching this video.